안녕하세요. 안녕하세요. 반갑시요. These are just a few examples of how Koreans say hello in their different regional dialects. A dialect is defined as a regional variety of language distinguished by features of vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation from other regional varieties and constituting together with them a single language. On the Korean peninsula, there are 6 major dialectal zones based roughly on different geographical regions. These include the northwestern dialects, Pyongyang Province, the northeastern dialects, Hamgyong Province, the central dialects including Gyeonggi, Hwanghae, Gangwon, and Chuncheon provinces, the southwestern dialects from Cholla Province, the southeastern dialects from Gyeongsang Province, and the Jeju dialect from Jeju Island. In particular, the Korean dialects differ based on the vowel system, reflexes of earlier segments in the language, and palatalization.
지역마다 표현 많이 다르네요, 그치?
많이 달라요.
부산 제일 센 거 같고, 제일 친근하고, 전라도 제일 부드럽고, 제주도 제일 이국적이야.
However, due to perhaps political reasons, for example, the Chola dialect was a source of prejudice because the region was known for political opposition and economic deprivation, or for reasons such as the intonation, tone, etc., compared to the standard Seoul dialect is different. For example, the Gyeongsang people have dialect inferiority complex about their own dialect and view it negatively because they think their language sounds aggressive, old-fashioned, and ignorant compared to the soft, classy, and sophisticated, smart, and polite Seoul dialect. Due to this, prejudice against regional dialects that is not the standard Seoul dialect exists. Although prejudice against regional dialects is not as present currently as it was in the past, in many ways, especially through media in which entertainers make comical jokes about dialects and attacking people by making others see the dialect speaker as uneducated. Korean people still have and create certain views against these dialects. Therefore, we propose that in the 21st century, there is an underlying prejudice and different perceptions of those who speak various regional Korean dialects other than the standard dialect, which are created by the standard Korean users on the Korean peninsula and Koreans who live outside the peninsula.
The Oxford Dictionary definition of prejudice is a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. In multicultural societies, we often hear of racial or gender prejudice being prevalent in history and even in the present day. In an homogeneous society like Korea, these kinds of prejudice are not as prevalent. However, dialect prejudice is. Since there are not a lot of academic articles on examples of dialect prejudice and discrimination from the past, I will be referring to the TVN drama Reply 1997. It is evident in the drama that in the 90s, the time period that the drama takes place in, this whole dialect is perceived as superior to countryside dialects like the Busan dialect that the main characters speak. For example, when the 2 main characters meet up after a while, they both comment on each other's use or lack of use of the Seoul dialect. Yoon-jae comments on Siwon's accent, saying that she hasn't fixed it yet. This gives the assumption that the proper way or right way to speak is in Seoul dialect, and the wrong way to speak is in Busan dialect or other countryside dialects. This idea of Seoul dialect being perceived better than others is seen in a more recent example that comes from Lisa Jeon's study of language perceptions in Korea. She asked people from different areas of Korea to label regional dialects as positive or negative. She found that people from Seoul who speak the standard dialect viewed their own speech positively and the speech of Cholla and Gyeongsang negatively. She also found that even people from Gyeongsang displayed what Takeshi Shibata calls a dialect inferiority complex, where they viewed their own speech negatively and the speech of Seoul and Cholla positively. Because of speech prejudice, labels or connotations have been made. These kinds of connotations are seen in South Korea-based YouTuber Dave's video on Korean regional dialect differences. He had gathered 4 friends, each from different regions of Korea: Seoul, Cholla, Busan, and Jeju. Throughout the video, there were certain editing choices that Dave made that provide a perception of each dialect, especially of the Busan and Jeju dialect. For example, whenever his Jeju friend would talk, there would always be question marks. This gives the perception of the Jeju dialect and his friend as foreign and not Korean. When his friend from Busan would talk, fire would be inserted around the subtitles, giving the Busan dialect and his friend the perception of being angry, rough, and strong.
Like other South Korean dialects, Some South Korean people show prejudice towards the North Korean dialects. Due to the vastly different societies between North and South Korea, North Korean defectors who come to live in South Korea often have a difficult time adjusting. The main difference between the North Korean dialects, for example, the North Korean Standard Pyongyang dialect and the Standard South Korean Seoul dialect, is that North Korea prefer native words to Sino-Korean words and Sino-Korean words to loanwords. This is why when North Korean people escape to South Korea, they actually have a hard time communicating and reading South Korean terms, and some may not even be able to read Hangul.
North Korean defector students could understand less than 50% of the terms in the textbooks. This led to them being neglected from regular education, and that led to disparity in employment and income.
North Korean defectors also have a difficult time finding jobs because some South Korean citizens treat the defectors as outsiders and uneducated people.
There's definitely a lot of prejudice for North Korean defectors. Some of them might say that they're from a different province to explain their different dialects. Some of them might say that they're ethnic Korean Chinese instead of North Koreans. When they are found out, then they're called liars, or they'll be accused of things that they have no relationship with.
Adjusting to South Korea was a challenge.
When you say you are from the North, people treat you differently, like an outsider. Also, they might look down on you a bit. That was difficult, trying to be like a South Korean so that you can be treated fairly.
Not only are North Koreans discriminated against because of their dialect, but also due to the fact that South Koreans view North Koreans as completely different people, although they share one language.
Koreans in North America, mainly the US and Canada, are not considered real Koreans, even though they speak fluent Korean. Second-generation Korean North Americans adopt Western values. Over time, English becomes one of their primary languages. They begin to participate more vigorously in activities with North American peers instead of Korean community activities. Timothy Lee defines that a true Korean must not only have pure Korean blood, but must embody Korean values, morals, and the mindset of the Korean society. Because North American Koreans have adopted Western values and languages, although alongside of their heritage values, they do not fit into the definition of a true Korean anymore. Interesting fact. By 1903, a small Korean community formed in America, which consisted of Seo Jae-pil, the founder of the first Hangul newspaper, The Independent News, and Lee Seung-man, the first president of South Korea.
Out of the 20 participants that were surveyed, a majority answered that they really only hear dialects when they venture out to different regions. One person noted that my friends speak Seoul dialect to me even though they are from the countryside, leading to the question of whether people who speak dialects might feel a certain complex about it. 50% claimed not to have any impressions regarding different dialects, while another 45% had different impressions, like some dialects sound a bit aggressive and some friendly depending on word choices and tone, or they come off strong. One person said they like the sound of dialects, while another said they don't like regional dialects.
In response to a question regarding having different impressions about different regional dialects, most people responded that they had no impressions, but there were some varied comments. Impressions ranged from sometimes they want to learn their dialect, that they were less educated, or simply that they came from another place besides Seoul. At the same time, most people agreed that they don't assume any qualities of the speaker based on their dialect. When we asked dialect speakers how they felt about speaking in dialect in front of standard Korean speakers, we received some negative responses.
This brings us back to the question regarding how some people might have a complex regarding their dialect. As mentioned in question 10, people from other places can still have a Seoul accent. Judging from responses, there is a general agreement that the Seoul or Gyeonggi dialect is the one that is viewed as most professional and educated versus the other dialects that might make a speaker seem rough or less educated. Just like in the West, where people might be amused with a speaker who has a British accent or a Southern accent, a similar case appears to apply here, where people might take some sort of interest, whether positive or negative, on the speaker's dialect. For respondents who speak Konglish, there appeared to be a bit of insecurity with that particular dialect, with some people saying that they will probably laugh at me, that it's embarrassing, or it makes them feel out of place, like an imposter. Upon further interview, one respondent noted that in Korea there is a general perception that a person who uses a Gyeongsangdo dialect can appear to have a strong personality and machoism, and Chungcheongdo speakers were stereotyped as slow. Overall, people who speak with a dialect seem to have a complex about their dialect and want to correct it to be able to speak Gyeonggi.
Because most Korean linguistic research revolves around Standard Korean, academic papers comparing the prejudice against other dialects in the past and present are scarce. One point we can consider about the difference between prejudice in the past and present is that due to globalization, Standard Korean is being promoted by the country. This is the form of Korean most foreigners learn, and it is the most globally familiar. However, foreign Korean linguists and those who are interested in the Korean language find themselves immersed in other dialects and wish for them to be well recognized. In this way, other dialects are promoted and are put in a positive spotlight.